Donald Trump gets a $5,000 sanction and a threat of jail from Judge Engeron out of New York City. We know this is the case that Tishy James is bringing against him, suing him for all sorts of made-up charges, in my humble opinion. But now we're going to take a look at the order that dropped from this judge, and it involves a gag order. The judge said Trump can't post certain things. He posted something. Trump was ordered to remove it, and he did, but the removal didn't come down from another location on his website, and so somebody notified the court about it, and the judge was furious. And you can hear him, not hear him because we can't have cameras in the courtroom, but we're going to see that he was basically threatening the defense with putting Trump in custody, holding Trump in contempt. Here is what NBC News reports. They say the judge threatens to imprison Trump for violating a gag order in the New York fraud trial. Now, to be honest with you, I think that it's probably a little bit overeager. You know, I'm not sure what they're going to be able to do with this. Like, literally, can they imprison Trump? He's got Secret Service protection. There's all sorts of really complicated things just in mechanics about this. But it's not that the judge couldn't, you know, revoke his passport or order him to home detention or something. Like, judges have a lot of power to nudge people into compliance in their courtroom when they say people are violating them. And this is one of them. $5,000 fine. And here's what it says. The judge presiding over Donald Trump's $250 million civil fraud trial on Friday fined Trump $5,000, floated the idea of jailing him for defying a partial gag order. Earlier in the day, the judge was livid when he revealed that Trump failed to comply with an order, and he raised the possibility of putting the former president in prison, happening in court today. Engeron said Trump had posted on his social media account an untrue and disparaging post about his court clerk, and we're going to read through the order, but he leveled the fine. He said, "You better not violate this again." Now, Trump's defense attorney was in court, and we're going to read the official order from the judge himself, which is why we're fast forwarding through this. But Trump's attorney, his name is Christopher Keese, and he came out and he said, "Your Honor, listen, based on my understanding, this was truly inadvertent." He said the Truth Social post was taken down when the court asked. Okay, Trump published it, but Truth Social was taken down, and Trump never made any more comments about the staff. Okay, he understood. But it appears no one took it down on the campaign website. This is Trump's lawyer. He says, "It is unfortunate, and I apologize on behalf of my client." So kind of falling on the sword here. Now, Trump had posted those statements, and we saw that he had deleted it, but it ended up on his website. But the judge was still unhappy about it. Hate feeling miserable the day after drinks? I did too. Luckily, a game-changing product called ZBiotics is here to help. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for the rough next day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best the next day. That's it. Pretty easy. I wish I had this during law school. Here's how it works. They come in little bottles, very convenient. You give one a good shake, twist the top off, slam it back, and you're done. Easy. Tastes delicious, goes down smooth. I got the 6-pack, which looks like this. It comes with an instructional booklet inside that gives you more details on how to use it and how it works. A very simple twist top right here. And of course, the reminder to drink responsibly is printed on every bottle, which is always very important, and that's coming from a former criminal defense attorney. So this Halloween, pair your candy and your cocktails with ZBiotics to avoid a spooky next morning. Go to zbiotics.com/RobertG or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Robert G at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or the occasion. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/RobertG and use the code RobertG at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode. And so I want to read through the full order so we can see the extent of this. And the thing that has me most concerned about this type of behavior or this type of conduct from the courts is that it sets a precedent, because what we have now is a gag order also out of the January 6th case. And every time we get a gag order and every time Trump can't speak a little bit, it's just like narrowing the hula hoop that's around him, right? He's got certain amount of free speech space and wingspan that he has. But every time he gets a gag order, they narrow that wingspan, right? He's less free. They're like closing the walls in around him. And And then they create these traps where he could have a sanction for this, right? It's basically a gag order trap where he can say something because he's responding to Mike Pence or he's responding to somebody in the campaign, and it crosses the line, and boom, it just sets off this trigger point where the judge can now sanction him or even imprison him. And this judge may not do this. Remember, this is just a civil case. But in Judge Chutkin's case, in the January 6th case, that is a criminal case. And that order is much broader than this one. And so if Trump, like, for example, has another mistake in this case, the judge is very likely could say, I've already given you your fine. Now you're determined to be in home detention, right? The penalties can escalate pretty quickly. I think will happen, as we've already seen, is Judge Chutkin from Washington, D.C. is looking to New York because she looked to New York in authorizing her own gag order. She said, well, I mean, he's threatening people over there. That's why I'm justified. And now she's going to say Trump violated it again. Now I'm really justified. So it's going to be a bunch of spring-loaded judges everywhere waiting for Trump just to make one minor move, one little mistake, boom, sanction, boom, penalties, boom, fines. He's not allowed to use a cell phone. He's not allowed to get on the internet. He can't write any posts or something like that. Who knows what they'll do? But they'll do it because they're already doing it. It starts with a fine and it escalates from there. This is the order from Judge Engoron, and now it is going against Trump. Let's dig right into it. You see, this one comes out of the Supreme Court of the state of New York from New York County, and New York is weird. They call their lower level courts Supreme Courts, and they're not. They're like district level courts. So we're not actually in the Supreme Court as we most know it, which is the highest court of the land. We're actually in a lower level court. But this was filed 10/20 in October, and you can see the case is the case that we're all familiar with. It's big Letitia James. Her name is Tish James on one of her X accounts. That's why we call her Tish, because she's the biggest Tish in New York. She is the state attorney general after all. And so she's there. The state of New York is suing Donald Trump and the rest of the Trump org people, Eric Trump, Weisselberg, and others. So here's what the judge said, right? This is the ruling that is sanctioning Trump. It says Arthur Engoron signing this thing, and this is the fine. He says, all right, some time ago on October 3rd, during a break in this trial, defendant Donald Trump posted to his social media account an untrue, a disparaging, and a personally identifying post about my principal law clerk. That post was actually saying that I think that the clerk was like the judge's girlfriend or something like that. Or no, it was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend, because the law clerk had been hanging out with Chuck Schumer and she was like whispering into the judge's ear. And Trump was getting irritated about this because it's like, judge, are you in control of your courtroom or is somebody else telling you what to do? Because you're the judge, not her. She is the law clerk. And if the law clerk is hanging out with Schumer and she's telling you things, judge, we might have a problem with that. So Trump posted, he says, hey, Chuck Schumer's girlfriend's coaching the judge. And the judge gets a message. Oh, Trump can't say that about my law clerk. She's really smart. She's helping me a lot. Says, I spoke to the defendants, meaning the judge, both on and off the record. So on the record's in the courtroom when everything's being recorded. Off the record is usually, it can be either in the courtroom when they turn off the recordings or when they go back into the judge's chamber. He might say, hey, I want to talk to the lawyers back here. Come on back with me. In a case like this, I'm sure that's happening probably every day. Off the record, so not on the record, not something that is recorded, I ordered Donald Trump to remove the post immediately. Approximately 10 minutes later, Donald Trump represented to me that he had taken down the offending post. So do you like how this is working in the United States? Donald Trump posts a message, which in my opinion is totally free speech. You may disagree with the content of the message. You may not like the fact that he was belittling a judge, his clerk or something. Like, I wouldn't recommend that generally. Like, it was my client. I'm like, hey, don't call the judge and the clerk names, okay? Just because. But when I was representing clients and practicing, my clients weren't the victims of political prosecutions. You see that? So I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about saying, defending against a partisan political prosecution that was corrupted by politics. So I didn't have to worry about that. So in this case, okay, Trump's only defense to a partisan political hack corruption prosecution is free speech, which is why we have free speech as the First Amendment. Okay, you know that if your institutions of power are corrupted, one of the first things they're going to want you to stop doing is talking about their corruption. So that's why we put free speech ahead of the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, which are generally your criminal amendments: search and seizure, due process, right to counsel. So we put it first because it is that important. And we put the one that it talks about guns and defending yourself second, because that's kind of the priority scale. Okay, free speech comes at all cost. It is the most important thing. So still, all that being said, in America, we have one judge judge in New York City that is presiding over a case being prosecuted by Tish, who tells and lectures the former president of the United States, who's current leading candidate, definitely for the Republicans, to delete a post of free speech talking about the partisan, in my opinion, corruption that you're watching in the Trump prosecutions. Take down your post. So Trump gets over there, he pulls out his cell phone. He's like, okay, I'm gonna get on True Social. All right, Your Honor, I deleted it. You happy? And Trump promised me, the lecturing judge, that he would not engage in similar behavior going forward. The judge writes, I then, on the record, after, maybe they went back in chambers, or maybe this was in the courtroom, I don't know. But he says, I then, on the record, we're back on the record, I then imposed on all parties to this action a very limited gag order. That's what he says. That, quote, forbids all parties from posting, emailing, or speaking publicly about any members of my staff. Okay, and that is pretty narrow, right? If it's only like his staff specifically, that's fine. It's not even the judge, not Tishy, it's just his staff. Emphasizing quite clearly that personal attacks on members of my court staff are unacceptable, inappropriate. I will not tolerate them under any circumstances. All right, I get that from a judge. Now, I would still make my argument that Trump is allowed to say that because it is free speech. And if you're talking about corruption in the courts, you need to be able to talk about the clerks, the bailiffs, the people who take your ticket for parking, right? You got to talk about that stuff. You don't get to just curtail people's free speech when they're making criticisms about the institutions that are in control of the levers of power. That's why we have free speech. It's to petition our government for a redress of grievances against those very institutions of power. Now, again, you might not like it. And like from a perspective, I was the same way. Okay, my law firm, anybody talked to one of our legal assistants badly, even if it was a client. What did you say to our team? No. That's not how we do things here. You understand me? So like, I get that. And I think Trump did too, because he deleted the message and he didn't do it again. He said, I further made clear that failure to abide by this directive will result in serious sanctions. Now, they say, despite this clear order, last night I learned that the subject offending post was never removed from DonaldJTrump.com. And in fact, it's been on that website for the past 17 days. And so I don't know how they have this set up over there, but I think they have a scraping system. So whatever Trump posts on his Truth account, gets converted into a post or a blog on DonaldJTrump.com. Just like what we do at RobertGovea.com. All of our segments are translated into videos. Thank you for going there to subscribe to our newsletter. In fact, that this post had been on the website for 17 days. Now, the judge says, I understand it was removed late last night, but only in response to an email from this court, which means that, I think it was an oversight. As soon as they knew about it, they're like, oh, we delete it. So today, in open court, counsel for Donald Trump's lawyer stated that the violation of the gag order was inadvertent, and it was an unfortunate part of the process that is built into the campaign structure, right? That's exactly right. So he tweets or truths, then it just gets carried over. Now, the judge says, and he's going to maybe do it this time, he says, giving Trump the benefit of the doubt here, he still violated the gag order. Now, they're giving us a standard here, okay? They're saying that the standard is, so again, like this is where we're setting up mines, like literal mines in a minefield, and Trump is going to be tap dancing around this for the rest of the campaign. This is all by design. Watch this. Here's the line. It says, contrary to, this is from another case from 1997. I don't know what court it's from, but it's from 1997 case, maybe some state case. It's not Trump's case, but let's apply it to Trump. Contrary to Trump's claim on appeal, a finding of civil contempt, like this is what Trump is being threatened with here, it does not require a showing of willful disobedience. In other words, Trump didn't have to intend to put that thing on the website. The fact that it made it to the website, that's Trump's fault. Doesn't have to be willful, doesn't have to be intentional. It can be a mistake. So if somebody from Trump's campaign takes one of his statements and does a mistake about it, this judge is holding Donald Trump personally liable for it and fining him for it, as we're about to find out. So just to be clear, the entire campaign is now on high alert. He continues further. Now, whether it's intentional or the result of whatever campaign structured negligence, the effect of the post on its subject, my staff, is unmitigated by how or why it remained on Trump's website for 17 days. Apparently, it was not that big of a deal because nobody found out about it until somebody was like searching around. Like if she was getting bombarded with threats every day because it was such a threatening message, wouldn't somebody have noticed it was up? No. Now, moreover, Trump may not evade liability for violating a court order by saying that someone else did it, by blaming it on an employee. Trump's responsible. He says, in the current overheated climate, incendiary untruths can, and in some cases already have, led to serious physical harm and worse. He says, Donald Trump Trump has received ample warning from this court as to the possible repercussions of violating my gag order. He specifically acknowledged that he understood and would abide by it. Accordingly, issuing yet another warning is no longer appropriate. Okay, first strike, second strike. What happens next? This court is way beyond the warning stage. Man, I've been nervous that they're going to try to lock him up or do something. Given the defendant's position that the violation was inadvertent, and given that it is a first-time violation, this court will impose a nominal fine, $5,000, payable for the New York Lawyers Fund for client protection within 10 days of this order. But even though that's tip money for you, Trump, he says, make no mistake, future violations, whether intentional or unintentional, will subject the violator, you, Donald, to far more severe sanctions, which may include but are not limited to steeper financial penalties, holding Trump in contempt of court, and possibly imprisoning him due to New York law. Signed, Judge Arthur F. Engeron, New York Court. So, you know, I know it's Trump. I know it's a judge. I know sometimes these things, it can feel like we're in a little bit of a circus. But when I read stuff like this, you have no choice as a lawyer, as a defendant, you have no choice but to take it very, very seriously, even if he is the former president. Now, the reason this stuff is such a problem in our constitutional order is because Trump is, in my opinion, in the movement of America, it's everything that Trump is sort of fighting for now is much bigger than this political partisan prosecution hack brought by Tishy James in this particular jurisdiction. The interest of all of Americans in voting for their favored candidate, and that candidate being able to speak, and that candidate being able to say basically, you know, largely whatever he wants within the confines of the law. And if he gets gagged, if he gets sanctioned, you know, it's going to cause a head. We're going to have two immovable objects of American civil structure hitting against each other. One is the justice system. One is the democracy electoral system coming like this, which is why we don't do this, which is why in the last 234 years in this country, we've never done stuff like this. But here we are, and it's because they are so panicked that they are breaking glass in case of emergency. They're doing everything they can to stop Donald Trump from winning, including escalating threats, even for a mistake, okay? Even for a mistake, Trump's going to be liable. And Chutkin's going to piggyback off this, and Jack Smith is going to use this as saying Trump willfully violates, and they're going to do what they can to turn the screws even tighter. So we'll be here, my friends, to continue to cover this and monitor this. I do hope you invite somebody to come over here and check out the channel so that they can see what's happening to Donald Trump. They can see and unpack all of this disgusting behavior that's happening around this country in America, censoring our own president and his free speech. Thanks for inviting them. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.